Communist China is tightening its grip on Hong Kong using the new national security law they imposed this past summer. Earlier this month, Jimmy Lai, the outspoken Catholic pro-democracy advocate and media tycoon, was charged with fraud and denied bail. He remains in prison. Bill McGurn this week in the Wall Street Journal wrote movingly about Jimmy Lai, his plight, and the silence of the church. We're joined now by Bill McGurn. Bill, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Raymond.
You don't only know Jimmy Lai, you're his godfather. And this
Right.
piece you wrote, it asked the very important question, where is the church and why is Pope Francis silent?
Yeah, here's the reason for the question. As you mentioned, China is tightening its grip on Hong Kong, and this national security law is what provoked all those protests last year. So Jimmy was arrested on these trumped up charges of fraud, business fraud. It's a contract dispute over his office building. And like others, he hasn't actually been charged with a national security offense yet. But when his bail hearing came, the government took the position that he was a national security risk. So they denied him bail on those grounds. So we still don't know what national security charges he faces. And by the way, that's not unique to him. The same day that he was arrested, three young pro-democracy champions, Joshua Wong, Agnes Chow, and Ivan Lam, they pleaded guilty to some charges and were sent to prison. Agnes is also a Catholic. As you mentioned, Jimmy is the founder of one of Hong Kong's most popular newspapers, Apple Daily.
Right.
Very strong, very pro-American, anti-communist, and
Right.
And he's also Hong Kong's most prominent Catholic.
Wow. Have you spoken to the Lai family? Do we know how he's doing?
I think he's doing well. I've spoken to his wife Teresa, who is just a pillar of strength, and I've spoken to some people who have met him, and I'd like to go visit him over there. I don't know if I'll get the chance, but my suspicion is that when people come in there, Jimmy consoles them rather than the other way around. One of his associates just texted me last night saying he had just visited Jimmy, and Jimmy said, "Don't worry about me. In my suffering, I see the glory of God."
I want to give people a sense of who Jimmy is. This is a little clip of him from a conference he took part in earlier. Watch.
You know, being a Catholic, you have the instinct to stand up for what is wrong. You know, because that's the way that you walk in the way of the Lord.
Now, in November, Bill, Pope Francis welcomed NBA players, American basketball players, to discuss their efforts to address social justice. Yet the case of Jimmy Lai and even Cardinal Joseph Zen couldn't get a meeting with the Pope to discuss this Vatican-China agreement. This agreement, by the way, has been renewed, even though China is one of the worst abusers of religious liberty. How are the long-suffering faithful in China receiving all of this, particularly in Hong Kong, Bill?
They're really suffering. It's very dispiriting. I think there's enough evidence that this deal has been a disaster. It gives the communist government in Beijing, which is hostile to all religion, incredible say over the selection of bishops. It has not eased up repression. I was taught that I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. And, the lies are saying, where is our shepherd? Where is he? Our dad, our husband, he's in jail for his principles. Where is our shepherd? And they get no answer.
What is your suspicion, Bill? Why do you think the Pope is so silent on this? He speaks out about everything, as you mentioned in your column: climate change, gay marriage, procreation, everything under the sun, the stock market, population control. He says nothing about the religious persecution of this regime in China upon his own people. Why?
Well, if I knew that, I'd be infallible, right? I'd have such great wisdom. Look, I'd say there's two possible explanations that I can see for the Pope's silence. We know he's silent. We see this. He's not speaking. So one, I think, is that he calculates that if he says something that angers China, they break the deal. And they think this is the best deal they'll get. They acknowledge that it's not good. Like it's not perfect, it's not what they want, but they're trying to preserve the church. The other explanation is that he just doesn't care about these people. I think I'm sort of inclined to number one, which I think is the more charitable explanation, but it's not a very good one for not speaking up. You know, if that would be a realpolitik decision, right? That China is so bad, they're so hostile, we're never going to get the freedoms we deserve and so forth.
Right.
But this is the best deal we can make. And my answer to that can be your argument. That's a serious argument. And maybe in the long term, you'll be proved right. But I think if a church is going to make that argument, it has to acknowledge that this is the terrible cost it carries. We have to be silent when members of our own flock are chucked in jail unjustly.
Yeah, or murdered unjustly, or rounded up unjustly, or tried unjustly. I mean, the horrors of China that we have long detailed here and that you've written so eloquently about for so many years. I don't know how you turn a blind eye to that, unless, Bill, the other third possibility might be at a time when there is a cash crunch, China is there with an open checkbook and is willing to help on this initiative or that, and perhaps that buys them some goodwill. And the realpolitik that you talk about is a nice way to kind of talk over that deeper transactional relationship. But we'll see what happens here. I want to move on to the relationship between America and China and what it could look like under a new administration, assuming Biden takes the presidency. Joe Biden said this about China to a crowd in Iowa last year.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not they're competition for us.
They're not competition for us, Bill. Biden downplays this threat to China as an economic force or threat of China. Is Biden in denial?
Yes, I think on that he is. Look, the Chinese people are not bad folks, but the Chinese government, the communist government, are very bad folks. And they are challenging the U.S. in a host of areas. They're challenging us in Hong Kong. You know, we have a lot invested in Hong Kong. It was sort of an American outpost in Asia. They're challenging us on spying. Look, we just had a congressman who was sleeping with the spy. We just closed down a consulate in Houston that was a hotbed of spying. They're stealing our intellectual property rights. All sorts of things. They're pressing us in every area. Secretary Pompeo this week sanctioned 14 more Chinese officials who are participating in the crackdown of Hong Kong. And let's be clear, the crackdown of Hong Kong is about making it less special by eroding any line between Hong Kong and China.
In a New York Times interview, Biden said he would not rush to remove the tariffs President Trump imposed on China. How do you foresee the Biden administration dealing with China when it comes to trade particularly?
Well, I think that's a big question mark. I was encouraged that at least they're not going to take these things down because the Trump administration, especially Secretary Pompeo, have done quite a few things like the sanctioning of these individuals. So I do think Mr. Biden is right to say, let's wait. I'm not in a rush to undo everything because I think that leaves him with a stronger hand. Here's my overriding worry, whether it's trade, whether it's spying, whether it's Hong Kong. My overriding worry is that what Joe Biden really wants from China is its signature on a climate deal. You know, you've got John Kerry pushing this. He pushes it like it's another religion. And I'm afraid because any global climate deal needs China's name on it to have any credibility because they're one of the biggest carbon emitters. My fear is that they will look the other way on a lot of things because they so desperately want this deal.
That would be ruinous. There's talk of former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has that great deep resume of having been mayor of South Bend, Indiana, that he may be Biden's pick for the next ambassador to China. How will that be read in Beijing, Bill, do you think?
You know, I don't know. I mean, look, in some ways, I'm not so worried that he's not an expert. It's all the self-styled experts that get seduced by China. You know, they all think they've got the upper hand dealing with China, and China has a centuries-long history of making monkeys of people that do that. A lot really depends on what the policy is. Are they going to take China's challenge to us in the 21st century on a whole host of fronts, military, spy, everything, cultural. Are they going to take that seriously, or are they going to give it all up to get, John Kerry a climate deal that can win him a Nobel Prize?
Yeah, well, considering the aggressive acts in the South China Sea, the aggression toward Taiwan, should Biden become president, what do you think is going to happen on that front, particularly Taiwan, and what might the response of a Biden administration be, Bill?
Well, what I hope is that it's not ambivalence, because that's a very bad signal to China. Throughout history, America has stood pretty firm on Taiwan because we recognize if we give a bad signal there, things could end up ugly. It doesn't necessarily mean China doesn't have to invade. A few years ago, or when I was living in Asia, more than a few years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, China did military exercises offshore of Taiwan and just drove the stock market down and created all sorts of havoc. So they have a lot of ways to do this. And look, that's one of the things that they're going to do. You mentioned trade. Australia called for an independent investigation at WHO for how COVID-19 came about. And since then, China's been trying to bully Australia on trade because Australia sends, it's a tremendous amount, maybe 40% of his exports go to China, raw materials. So that's what they're trying to do. They're signaling to everyone, if you don't, hew to our line, we're going to pressure you using everything we've got.
Yeah, well, the entanglements we've seen unveiled this week with this spy ring connected to Democratic politicians in California and elsewhere, possibly Hunter Biden's exposure to the Chinese on that investigation. How do you think all of this ends? What does it tell us, Bill? Does it reveal how deep the tentacles of China run in the establishment of the United States?
I think that's what it's starting to reveal. A lot of the work they do is on campus. They fund these Confucius Institutes. They work through, student associations of Chinese and so forth. So it's not one thing. It's they probe with everything they got. Look, this week too, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo suspended these cultural exchange programs where they take and pay for our congressional staffers to go travel in China. One of the benefits they have is then they develop ties with these people, and you can't tell me that they're not trying to use those ties for espionage when they can.
Yeah, those junkets. Bill McGurn, thank you as always. Bill's commentary can be found at the Wall Street Journal at WSJ.com. Thank you, Bill. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Raymond. You too.